All right, so this is the wrong screen. Let's go back to Python. All right, so we made our first script. It was a very basic script. Now we're going to make a version 2, which is going to utilize classes so that we can see some of the foundational fundamental principles of classes, what makes classes classes, and so we could also see inside of a Python environment how it might work differently. So inside of here, we have second file. Me, it's blank. And do my import. Classes in Python. Use the class keyword to create a class. And the way the class keyword works is you pass in a name that you want to assign the class to. So in this case, we're going to make a class called CSV reader. And Python wants colon at the end of that with indentation, proper indentation, so that the interpreter or compiler knows that we are within the class. Because once we exit out of that indentation, that tells the interpreter or compiler that we are no longer inside of the class. So let's now define some functions. This right here, our dunder method, our double underscore method called double underscore init. This is a constructor. It's a very magical thing inside of Python that essentially allows us to attach attributes to an instance of a class. Because remember what we said earlier, classes are templates, they're blueprints. You create a class, it's not actually creating a real tangible object. It's just creating the instructions for how to create that object. It uses another built-in Python resource called self. Self is a reserved keyword that, like its name suggests, references the attributes of an instance, its own attributes, the attributes that belong to a self. And if that sounds kind of like circular and crazy, it does. But let's see it in action to get a better idea of what is really happening. In this case, we're creating a new attribute, right? This attribute is called file path. And this line right here, where we do self.filePath equals file path, this is what assigns the file path that we pass in to the instance. Again, it's going to seem crazy right now, but trust me, when we run this, it's going to make more sense. So self.data is just going to be an empty list because it'll be a placeholder for the data that we generate. And let's just have a very user-friendly print message here. This is so as we're developing and running tests, we have some idea of where we are in the code. There are more advanced ways to navigate your code as you're developing, but this is bare bones the simplest, fastest way to do that. All right, so we've got a class. Now we have a method in that class or a function. Those words are used interchangeably. And that method uses a built-in constructor called init or double underscore init, and that is what constructs the instance. So what does that look like? Now that we've defined the class, we can instantiate it. We can do something like CSV reader equals a new CSV reader with parenthesis notation. So this on the left is an attribute. It's a variable. It's what we're attaching the execution of this class method outputs. In this case, whenever you call a class in Python, the magic that's abstracted away behind the scenes is it's going to run like a function. But what it does is it instantiates the class into an instance. So everything that we define here will now exist under CSV reader. So let's save. Let's see what that looks like. Python. Actually, we're not going to see much if we just run the script as is, right? Oh, and we didn't pass in a file path. So, okay, earlier I wasn't able to copy the CSV, but I should be able to copy it now. Let's see if that command is still in here. Yes, I now have that file in the same directory. We no longer have to use that wonky ass path, and we could just pass in the path to the file that we want. Is this absolutely necessary? No, it should know to look in the same current directory for this file, but I'm going to put it in there anyway. And I am now going to run this script again, and it has run. It was able to initialize, but we can't really see what that means, right? So we could do a few things. One, we could do a print on the CSV reader. So we're now going to run this built-in function again, but instead of printing a string, we're going to pass in this data type, this attribute, which is an object that we instantiated. So let me make sure I save. I'm going to run this again, and it's going to spit this out, which is exactly what I wanted to see. This is telling me that we have a CSV reader object at some location in the memory, some hash location. This is good. This means that we have successfully instantiated CSV reader 1, and we can instantiate this as many, many, many times as we want. We could have CSV reader 1, CSV reader 2, so on and so forth. Like, let's pretend maybe we were passing in a different file. So once you've created a class, it's reusable. This is now modular code. We could make an infinite number of objects from this one blueprint. That is a big part of programming in Python. Any questions on that? Cool. So let's carry on. We're going to delete that because we don't actually need it. We don't need to instantiate this yet. We have to add more functionality to this script. So we're able to initiate or initialize, instantiate. Again, that could be used interchangeably. And now we want to actually run some logic on the data itself, because all we've done so far is we've created an object that does nothing and hasn't done anything with the file that we passed in. So let's create this new method. Is it still recording? Okay. And this method is going to load data. Just like we saw in the previous script we're using with open, this is a built-in Python method. So it opens a file. So it expects a file as its first argument. And then there are all of these optional arguments. All of these arguments afterwards. You notice this equal sign? This equal sign in any of these arguments means this is going to be the default value. And because it has a default value, it's no longer a required argument. We could run the with open command and only pass in the file path and ignore all the other ones, because the way this function was written, Python will know to just use these default values if nothing was passed in. We are specifying, however, what we want to use as a new line. So anything that you pass in will overwrite the default value. That is the open function in a nutshell. And that's essentially how you can read any built-in function or even functions that you write inside of Python. Just install an extension like the official Microsoft Python and Python debugger extensions, and then you'll have access to this nifty little, I don't know, VS Code built-in documentation thing. All right. So just like the last script, we're calling the with open method. We're passing in a file path. See how we're no longer passing in that file path manually, or in other words, we're not hard coding the file path. We're instead passing in essentially a command or a reference to that file path. Right now, we don't actually have the file path specified. We've just specified the instructions on how to reference it. So a lot of things to kind of hold on to in your mind, but as we press forward, we're really just expanding on the logic that we're assigning to this CSV reader blueprint, right? So you have to think through it in terms of what you want the end result to be capable of doing, as opposed to what you actually want in the moment right now, right? So that's a big part of how to think about programming. We're going to add a new method to print the data. And notice that it has a check here. We could use conditionals to make our logic more robust, just in case the file that we pass in has no data at all. We have some very basic error handling in here. If not self.data, basically if this equals null or just doesn't exist at all, then it's going to run this logic. Otherwise, it's going to go through a for loop. This should look similar. This was the same for loop in the previous script. It's going to iterate through every line of data, and it's going to run the print command for every line of data. Now, if we were to save this, we can run it, and we notice that it doesn't do anything, right? Because again, these are instructions. We haven't actually instantiated this class. So again, we would have to instantiate it. CSV reader, we're going to use snake case because Python likes snake case, equals CSV reader, parenthesis notation, and we want to pass in a file path, which again is just this. I said earlier that we don't need the dot /. It will understand either way how to interpret that. And now let's run it. It's been initialized, but it hasn't done anything. Why is that? Likely because there is... Actually, yeah, that's a question for the class. Why didn't it do anything?
You have to call the functions. You have to call the methods.
Exactly. It did nothing because we didn't do anything. Now that we've instantiated it, though, the way that we call the functions, we call it from the instance itself, the object. So now, using dot notation, we could do things like CSV reader dot load data. So we want it to load data first. And then we want it to read that data. So print data is next. So now we have in our script, we define a class. We've imported a library. We're instantiating our class. And then we're commanding that instance to run some of its functions. So let's save. Let's run the scripts. And we see that we get the same results that we got before. All right, now that we see that it's hunky-dory, is everybody up to speed with this? Are we all on the same page? Cool. I wonder if I should... Yeah, let's just go ahead and add the rest of this code. We're not really going to talk through it because it's a lot of the same stuff. So if you understand what we just talked about now, you'll be able to understand this. If you have the time, go through and take a deeper look into any of this logic, or I should say if you need to, and if you have the time. Otherwise, let's get all of this in there so I could show you one more thing. And again, Python is super finicky about indentation. You can change in VS Code the number of spaces that are inserted with a tab by default. And we notice, for example, like there's some wonky stuff happening here because me copying, not even from a markdown file, but from a preview of a markdown file. This is an extension that's reading my markdown file. It's handling the text a little differently than the markdown file itself. So when I paste it in, it's going to need a little extra tender love and care to get it to the state that I need it in. But it's not a biggie. I'm going to go ahead, get that done. Should have just a few more functions. Ooh, that one actually turned out nice. And let me just have one more down here. I'm going to save. Pay attention to this. It's throwing a complaint, but we'll talk about that when we hit it. Now, if we run this file, we could go ahead and create all of these calls to these methods again. But instead of doing that, there's something else we could do. Instead of running this script from our bash terminal, we could open up a Python terminal. And inside our Python terminal, we could import this script. So what did I name it? Okay, this is what Len was talking about at the start of the video. Don't use tax because the Python terminal does not like tax. So I'm going to Control D to get out of here. I'm going to use the move command to rename my file, py-csv-v2.py into, let's just call it CSV reader.py. Now, if I do an ls, I can confirm that it's been renamed. And now let's go back into Python. And now I could say from CSV reader imports the name of my class, CSV reader. Okay. It ran the entire script, which is okay. I could have commented this stuff out because normally you don't want logic to just run on its own, right? Because this was contained outside of the class, it's considered global logic. It's going to be run whenever you load the script, and that might not be the behavior you want. There are ways to get around this, which we don't have time to get into, so we'll just comment it out for now. And if I do another import, well, let's see if okay. Oh, wait, no, that was it. That was what I wanted. From CSV reader, import CSV reader. Oh, it still ran it. Why is, oh, because I saved py, whoops, saved the wrong file. All right, let me exit out of this again to save the right file this time. I renamed it, so I had to open this, delete this, save, close, load it one more time from CSV reader, import CSV reader, and voila, we have our class imported into our terminal. And now we could call it just the way we did before. So CSV reader 1 equals CSV reader. Remember how we defined it, right? We want to accept a file path. So we're going to say, again, not necessary, but it was hw_200.cv. And we have now instantiated this class. So just like we were doing inside of the script itself, calling functions, we could now do that more dynamically inside of a Python terminal itself. So if I were to run any of these new functions that I added, it should work. once I load the data, of course. We wrote this to require load data. Okay. I think I'm
CSV, I think.
yes. Yes, it is CSV. Thank you. All right, now that we have the right file name, let's run load data again, and it's been loaded. So now that it's been loaded, I'll be able to run any of these other methods. And let's just try some of that out. CSV.
Julius, how did you clear the screen a while ago? How did you
Oh
clear
yeah,
the screen?
sure. On a Mac, it's Command K. I don't know what the Windows equivalent is. Might be Control K. And it specifically in VS Code, if you haven't changed like your keyboard shortcuts, it clears the screen when you're like actively inside of the terminal. If you try to press Command K outside of it, it's going to pop up this message because it's assigned to a different command when you're inside the text editor as opposed to when you're in the terminal.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Control K clears it for me when I'm in Python. Yeah.
Cool. So let's see. We loaded the data. We can now run any of these other methods. Get row count and tab autocomplete still works. We have 200 rows, which is exactly what we want. And if we do get column info, it runs all that stuff as well. Notice that when we wrote these methods, we were passing in self, and we're not passing it in when we call it. We don't have to. It's part of how the self keyword was designed to work. You never have to manually pass in self when you're actually calling that function. Okay, so we should know that all of these works. Some of these, for example, will require additional parameters. So if we were to try and print a row without passing in the parameters that we wrote it to require, it's going to complain. So while we don't have to pass in self, we definitely have to pass in a start point. So let's say let's start at 0.5, and it's going to just print out row 5. Now, if we wanted a range, we could pass in another parameter that will overwrite this default value of none. So 5 comma 10 will give us this range of data. And let's see. That's essentially the same thing, except we have to pass in a string. So if we don't pass in the proper name, it's going to complain. Like none of these columns are called column, but I think one of them is called index. So now it reads that column, just that column. And then this last thing right here, if we try to call this, does anyone want to shout out what's going to happen if I try to call this? It is going to complain. Well, it's going to complain for a few reasons. It wants a file path. Maybe it needs to specify a file name too. That wording is just not great. Output.json. Okay. So now that we got the complaint that I was actually expecting, it's tied to where we were seeing that yellow squiggly inside of export to JSON. Oh no, it's gone. If I had hovered over that yellow squiggly, it would have said something along the lines of can't find. Oh, this is the README. That's why. It exit out of this. And with CSV reader, if we go back to that script, it's going to tell us JSON is not defined because we didn't import JSON. JSON is another built-in package that comes with Python. So we could just import it. And once we do, we'll have access to the JSON library and all of its methods. So now if we go back into Python and go ahead and re-import our CSV reader, do all the stuff we did before to like instantiate it. And then load. Oops. Right, this is when we had, oh, that's when they had like the typo. Okay. Now that it's been corrected, it load the data, it's been loaded, and now if we export it, data has been exported. Let's exit out of here, and let's do an ls, and you can see that we have the output.json. Any questions? All right. I know that might have been a lot, but again, we only need to know enough Python to be able to manipulate data, interact with databases, and run Flask this week. And for the most part, for most of the curriculum, you're not going to need to really know a lot of Python as well. Just like we were saying with Bash earlier, if you do go the extra mile to learn it now, then you'll see the opportunities where you can use it. Like when we start to work with AWS Lambdas. Lambdas are essentially just scripts that you could call at any point, and they could be written in virtually any language. So you could write a Lambda in Python. But more on that later. Let's go back now to a preview of what's going to happen these next few days. Tomorrow, you'll be covering pSQL. You'll go over a few more bash commands, and then you'll learn some terminal commands for pSQL. Then we'll manipulate some database data using a Python script. And this is where you'll learn how to activate a virtual environment, install a new package, and write some SQL code, as well as some Python. So that's on Tuesday. And then on Thursday, we'll use Python again to build a simple Flask app. So actually, this is what we want. So this is an example of what that's going to look like. We install Flask, which is again a new package inside a virtual environment. And once it's installed, we'll be able to import it. And once it's imported, we'll just be able to call it. It's going to have some syntax that's going to look new because we're throwing quite a bit at you. But again, all the code that you'll need will be provided. We just want to explain enough that you know what's going on in all of the code that we provide, because you'll need to use this code again on like an EC2, for example, where you're setting up Flask or whatever environment you're setting it up in. And then we have these collapsible commands. So you could take a stab at doing all of this stuff from memory. And if you need a hint, just expand it. And that's day 3. And day 4 will combine all of those things. And you will just repeat what you do locally on an EC2. Any questions? Cool. Let's now go back to SSH and SCP. Okay. This page, do you want to share again, or how are you feeling?
Amar, actually, um, help me out in the chat. So I'm good to go.
Right on. Awesome. All right. Anyone else?
I am not good to go.
Okay. How far are you into it, Jeremy?
I am at the copy or move the PEM file
Okay.
step 4 on connecting to a remote server.
Okay. Let's that was in day 4. Is that in lab 2 or 3?
Lab 1.
Okay. All right. So you're around here, I'm guessing?
Yeah, so I made the directory. Now I just need to move the PEM file. I downloaded it as an Internet Explorer file. I don't know if that's correct or not, but it's still a PEM file. It just has the Internet Explorer logo next to it where I put it.
So wherever you downloaded it from, have you copied it over to your .ssh folder yet?
No, that's what I need to do.
Okay. So let's see. I mean, there's 2 ways to do it. You could do it from anywhere, really. If you were inside of your SSH folder, you would want to first find where you downloaded that file. In my case, it would be my home directory, downloads. Ooh, I do not want to show all 583 lines. And if I were to ls this, it would show all 583 of those files. But you would do a copy. Let's say I already know my location. So again, my file is here. Um, it's called cp class students.pem. All right, so this is the copy command. This first argument is the location of the file. So the file path for where the file I want to copy is. And then the second argument is where I want to copy it to. I'm already inside of my SSH folder. So I just use the single period symbol to tell it, hey, I want it inside this directory. And then I do a / to say this is a file path. I'm not just pointing to the directory.
My problem is finding it on the terminal, or I can't find it, and I try to go to like my home directory, and it says like such file or directory is found.
All right, can you share?
And I have it right here.
Oh, right. Okay. So because you're on Weasel, you have essentially like 2 separated environments. They are isolated from one another.
Makes sense.
So
Oh, wait, he can do the thing that I show. If you click back on Explorer, yeah, you right click Linux. Yeah, if you right click the Linux over there under quick access over on the left. Oh yeah, yeah, you can do it in here too.
Or no, where are you saying? I'll go over here.
No, if you go back to the Windows Explorer folder. Yeah, if you right click on the Linux over there on the Explorer, on the left, you see the Linux.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And opening a new window, you'll see like the Ubuntu stuff. And then you can just drag it over.
Drag it in here somewhere. Okay.
Yeah, it's in home. In home, you gotta go to home. And then wherever you have the do Charlie or whatever you want to place it, yeah.
Your SSH folder probably.
There it is, SSH. It's 2 up, 3 up, yeah.
The .ssh folder is going to be
In your home.
your
So
home directory, and the tilde symbol will take you to your home directory.
I think you got to do CD tilde.
All right, and it's a hidden folder. That's what the dot is. Yeah.
It's just cd.ssh.
Okay. Cool. All right. Now, do you have a copy of the SSH command and like the EC2 address?
Well, I have what's on here, but nothing else.
Okay. You should be able to SSH into it using SSH-I and then the name of the file.
So I'm SSHing into the file.
No, sorry, I wasn't finished. That's the first argument, and then the next argument is going to be the URL that you're trying to SSH into. So the user colon public IP.
How to find it? Is that for AWS or is this for the local?
AWS.
So I should go to it, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Threw it in the chat for you. So
Is it the same one for me? I don't know if it gets to the chat now.
the Zoom chat.
So like that, please.
Let's see. The Zoom thing keeps covering the bottom. Could you move your window up a bit? Okay, cool. Yeah. I think, yeah. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, did I'm sorry, I'm just
Oh, you can go on. Yeah. No, you got it.
how do you say it? Shemad? I don't know how you guys Shemad. There's a command you have to run just before that. I think the instructor on Saturday gave it to us on
That 444 is what we did.
yeah, and I think it has to be on the PEM file, right?
Yeah, on the PEM file.
Oh, go back to
Yeah. So chmod is a command that allows you to modify the credentials, permissions on any file. And it's kind of complex. There's like a lot of layers to it. But when you pass in numbers, you're essentially passing in like resets, right? And the permissions we specifically want is like 400. So yeah, just do that, pass in the file name, and you should be good to go. Cool. Okay, now if you want to exit, you could just type exit or Control D. And now you're back on to your
Oh, because I was in the EC2.
exactly. So now SCP is very similar. It works exact same way. So like, let's do this manually. Let's go ahead and create a new file. Just make like, I don't know, a dot file.txt
In SSH or out of it?
on your local machine. Yeah, right there. Yeah, so
what label it what?
like file.txt is fine. Just an example. Cool. Now you can do an SCP. Pass in the PEM file that you want again. So -I and then the PEM file.
And where's the -I represent?
Can't remember. Identity file, that it is. Yeah, so the -I lets you pass in the PEM key, and then the next argument you want to pass in will be the name of the file, the path and the name of the file, but it's in the directory that you're in right now. So you could just type file.txt, and now the username and URL that you're trying to send it to. So the same thing that you used before for the SSH, and then colon, and now the file path on the EC2 that you want to use. No space. No space after the colon.
Okay, so before he got there, he did the SCP-I and then the PEM file. He only did the PEM file because he's in the folder that the PEM file is. If he's not there, he has to put in the path to the PEM file.
Exactly.
To work.
Okay. Yeah. Now the path that you probably want to use in that last after the colon, it's just going to be like / and your name, I think. I think that's how it's set up. Or you can maybe use
home. I think it's home.
Okay. Yeah, use home.
And then something else. I forgot what was that.
You want me to find it on this first?
Oh, no. You don't need to find it on there. We already know what it is.
Okay, so just -home.
Yeah, you got to get rid of that space though, or else I'm going to throw an error. And then your name. I think that's how Chandra specified all the files. So /
It's home Ubuntu, then your name.
Oh, it's home Ubuntu. Okay. Cool. All right.
I have a quick question, Julius, since we're on this subject.
Sure.
So that PEM file, that has to be located in the, I guess, the current directory that you're in order to SCP something from there?
Not necessarily, because you could just point to it from whatever directory you're in.
So in this particular case, like if let's say that Jeremy was in his DevOps Charlie directory, would he have to actually go back and put in the file path .ssh, etc., CPS class or PEM file?
Yes, but it's pretty easy to do because it's located in the SSH folder. He could just use the home symbol, the tilde, and then the / .ssh.
Gotcha. Yeah, because I was having issues the other day, but then I found out that it worked in a different directory, so that answers that.
So after doing this, is my connection set up to the EC2?
Yeah, it's been set up. Basically, what this PEM key does is it's kind of like an it's a way to authenticate your identity, right? We created that PEM key inside of AWS, and then we gave it to all of you guys, and we set up the EC2 so that anybody that sends it this PEM key will be allowed into it when they try to SSH. And the SSH command and SCP commands are essentially the commands that you use to interact with this external URL, right? So you have to essentially show your pass as you're entering, and that's what the identity file is.
Okay.
So I have a question.
Sure.
So, because when he put in his name, I knew that our instructor on Saturday only put our first names in there.
Mhm.
So I was like, okay, well maybe it just made a new directory because it shouldn't be Jeremy. I'm sorry, I don't know how to say your last name. Hugo?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, perfect. Hugo. Okay, so um he just had Jeremy. So it didn't actually create a new directory. It just kind of it created that, but the file is like gone. I don't know. Like that first part was created, but the next part wasn't. And is it because it was more like it worked more like move or kind of maybe renamed it? So let me try catting it. Maybe
Yeah,
maybe
that's
that.
a good question. I'm going to try to SSH right now and see what it actually looks like. Oh, we might have hit like the limits. I'm not having any, I'm having issues SSHing.
Well, yeah, so then it like kicked me out and it was just like the system will power off now and it just turned off.
Yeah,
It completely just was like, no, you can't do that. And then I think
we,
it turned off the EC2s.
yeah, that's going to be one of the challenges of during the cohort. We have to, as a not-for-profit, we have to be mindful of the resources we use. So we're like using these rather weak micro instances of the EC2. So after a while, we're gonna hit like these limitations, and then we just kind of have to wait for the bandwidth to be recovered. Um, we could get around this by setting up EC2s, more powerful EC2s, setting up multiple EC2s, things like that. Um, but for now, Paige, what were you seeing? So you're saying that file didn't exist in the location that Jeremy set?
Yeah, it seems like it worked in a way like I said, it kicked me out right after I wrote it. It said Jeremy, like when I try to change directory into that, even though it didn't even, I mean, I could kind of share my screen too, or I'll take a screenshot. I don't have to share my screen. I'll show you guys what I saw, just so you don't have to stop sharing your screen. And I'm assuming, due to admin restrictions, I can't share it, but I'm assuming instead of it worked more like a move, if that makes any sense. So instead of creating that at home, that Ubuntu, and that being a directory, it made that the name of his text file instead. But I don't know if that's actually what
Oh,
happened.
yeah, what happened was Jeremy didn't include the forward slash at the end of that path.
Well, that and that directory didn't. That is not a directory. What he put at the end is a directory. It was just his
Right.
first name.
But it doesn't matter because the SCP command is reading that whole thing as a file name. It's thinking, oh, this is the file name that you want. It's right.
Wish I could. And no, it just has that last piece as like. Here, let me. I guess I should share my screen so you guys can
Okay. All
look
right.
what I'm.
So inside of the home directory, inside of Ubuntu, the file name is Jeremy Bugle.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it's because he didn't have the forward slash. The forward slash at the end would have specified that last part was a path. And then
This part. Oh, I get what you're saying. So if he had put that at the end here, I mean, at the end in his command, it would have then been blue like this and ended up being an actual directory. And inside of that directory would have been his text file.
or it might have complained and said that directory doesn't exist.
So should I
But
change or not?
I wonder if I'm curious if I can,
Yeah,
unless it's
I can
just
make
down.
here. Let me see if I could reboot this EC2 or anything.
Well, the good news is with the EC2 thing,
Do we
the
need to
first year is free.
do we need to keep this Amazon or the EC2 path copied in a notepad or something? Are we going to be using this a lot?
I mean, that's a good question. Not necessarily. We could spin up and spin down EC2s as we please. We may not continue to use this one. I know for Saturday's exercise, I was hoping to use a Terraform file so the instructors could all just kind of run the exact same sequence of resource creation steps, just to like minimize variation and stuff between the different instructors setting up EC2s. In that case, yes, you continue to use the same URL, but if we take this EC2 down and then we create a new one, it's going to have a different URL. It'll be different every time. As long as this EC2 persists inside of AWS, as long as it's not destroyed, you could use this one.
Okay.
Okay. Jeremy, let's go back to your screen and let's do one more thing. Let's work on those configurations. So if we do well, first off, actually, press up, delete Hugel, do a /, and now press enter. It might not let you pass it because it might still be hanging. But this is what you're going to want to run once the EC2 is like back up and running so that you can copy that. If you wanted to copy that file up there, I just realized that's just like a junk file.
Does this have anything to do with, I have these up. I'm trying to, I don't know, I had some of them stopped or running. I was trying to get into one. Does that have anything to do with it not being up?
What is that?
Like, why do I have like 4 of these? And is this just the one it's supposed to be, or?
Yeah, that's a good question. Why do you have? Oh, because it's showing all the stopped ones as well. I see. Yeah. There's only one running right now. The ones that were stopped just weren't destroyed, is all that was. And I don't know.
And the one that running, is it still this, or is it something different now?
It's still that one. Or actually, let me double check. Let me double check now, because now I'm not sure.
235. Mine says EC2 35 174 170 150.
Right. I'm starting up another instance. Okay, that's a really good call. Thanks for calling that out because I didn't even notice that. I think Chandra might have set up a load balancer, so if one EC2 went down, then it spun up another one. So I'm noticing that one, the one that is running, doesn't actually have a name. So that might have been created by the load balancer.
And just delete these. Is this all of ours, or is this my?
We're all inside of the same AWS organization right now. So it looks like CP class-server is running again. It's still initializing. So once it's done initializing, we'll see if that works.
I deleted the other ones.
Okay.
Able to describe volume.
All right, it's still initializing. Okay, while we're waiting on that, let's look at your config. So do you have a config file in there yet?
I don't think so. I was not at this PC over on Saturday, so I couldn't transfer anything or set anything really up.
All right. Do you want to walk through creating that config file right now?
Unless we have something else to do, or other people have questions, or we need to move on. It depends.
That's a good question. I think we're all caught up, right? I know we don't have a lot of time, but maybe we should at least give you half an hour to do your challenges. And I do know that Haisa, I got to work with you still on getting SSH access. So yeah, let's break. I'm going to open up breakout rooms. Let's keep stand down short today. So let's give you all 45 minutes to work. and we'll meet back in the main room at 9:15. How does that sound? Cool.